Hey guys, today I want to discuss something that's kind of taken me by surprise in the video game industry over the last decade that I've only really noticed recently. The action RPG genre. You think like it's always been around, but it really hasn't. Obviously, it's born from two different kinds of games: the action game and the RPG game. Traditionally, the RPGs are kind of split into two big categories. You have Western RPGs and JRPGs. JRPG standing for Japanese role-playing game. Now, Western RPGs are originally tabletop, or were born from originally tabletop games, such as Dungeons and Dragons, as well as sometimes Magic the Gathering, I think, is a big influence point, but also text-based games, adventure games, where I guess the real critical kind of characteristics are building your own character and creating their story as you play through, and kind of using a game mechanic such as dialogue trees in the case of BioWare games, or combat systems to kind of craft that story. JRPGs are kind of the other way around. You are given a story and given these characters, and to make it through the story, you basically display your prowess in the mechanic that they give you. It's most commonly turn-based fighting, where you have your gear, you have levels, and you progress through the game as you progress through your skill in the combat system. Now, the RPG genre has its problems. I think one kind of real issue that plagues it is that in order to get through the story, you're commonly tasked to grind against kind of boring, repetitious quests, usually to kind of get to your goal. And the reason why this is always an issue is because it's really difficult to hit a balance between introducing this new way of fighting or these new game mechanics to somebody, and progressing the story to the point where you don't actually have to do one more than the other. What I'm trying to say is, like, for example, in Final Fantasy, say 13, which is a recent game that got some critical feedback from the community at large. Basically, that game took 20 hours to kind of feed the tutorial to us. The story was still going on, but people felt like they weren't playing the game because it constantly required them to prove themselves. Every single thing they learned in the combat system, or everything you learn in the combat system, you're asked for hours afterwards to prove that you know how to use that system, which can be a real kind of immersion breaker and just boring. Just fighting the same monsters, proving that you know how to do this thing that they're trying to teach you over and over again. Western RPGs can be the same. Games like MMORPGs, typically World of Warcraft, for example, filled with quests where you're commonly just grinding because of to draw out the experience and to make that journey feel like your journey and make it last longer for various reasons. MMORPGs, because they're subscription based most of the time, usually trying to keep you around to hold up that subscription. But other RPGs have their own problems as well. Now, the action genre is interesting. I would say, because you only really saw it crop up in the previous generation, say PS2, Xbox. I think its origins lie a bit before that. Back to the SNES or the NES era, you look at games like Super Mario Brothers, and the same way you're going through a story, but you're getting there, you're going through the story by going from point A to point B. And in the PlayStation 1 era, games like Spyro the Dragon, Super Mario 64, Crash Bandicoot, Croc, all of those games, the third-person platformers, were kind of the real evolution of that. And as they fell away, as the mascots kind of got cast aside when people just got over them, what came out of that was the action game. So games like God of War and Devil May Cry, where you're kind of given a physical combat system, and only recently, only until the PlayStation era, were you able to get technically games that could do this, because it's very demanding on a processor to have someone doing something in 3D space that is quick and requires wit, in real time, and is beautiful to look at as well. Games like that, I think there's a problem with them. They're not really deep in their experience. You're constantly just mashing buttons, and once the visual appeal wears off, because it's usually about visual appeal, you don't really have much to do. So between action and RPG, they've got their real problems. Now, what has kind of really struck me recently, this crazy phenomenon, is the action RPG games. So starting with games like, I guess, Kingdom Hearts would be one of the earlier ones, where you do have this physical combat system where you are doing something that's quite repetitive, but it feels fresh all the time, because every time you leave battle you have this new way of tweaking your character. You're leveling up and progressing through the system, and it's, even though it's still you button mashing, it's feeling like it's more progressive as you're playing the game. And as you go through the story, you're still doing the same things, but it's compounding on itself, and the experience is building. Even the moment-to-moment experience is building as you're doing it. Now, you might think, well, Kingdom Hearts, what else? Think of any third-person game you've played recently that isn't a shooter, and that's an action RPG game. Think of Batman Arkham City, Arkham Asylum before that, Assassin's Creed. All of these games have just become... Even Zelda, like Skyward Sword, I played that recently, obviously. I finished it the other day, actually. Has the basic sword combat, which is engaging in itself because of the Wii Remote and the Wii Motion Plus, but you get, your sword gets upgraded, your shields get upgraded, you get different items, and as you go along you master the mechanics. Those are RPG elements, and I'd say that Zelda is now an action RPG game. It used to be top-down, it used to be side-scrolling, now it's an action RPG game. Anytime I think that developers want to kind of show a cinematic experience, and I don't know why the game industry has such a hard-on for the film medium, but every time you want to make an experience that's cinematic, people rush to the action RPG mode. And I think that's because it's so... I mean, I don't know, you guys tell me. Do you think... And even MMOs like Guild Wars 2, for example, one I'm really looking forward to, is an action RPG. It's got physical, real-time elements where you have to be in a certain place physically to get an advantage in combat. Let me know what you think. Do you like this? Are you like me? Are you running out of patience for straight-up RPGs and straight-up action games? Like, I can't even play Xenoblade anymore because it's just... Running around doing things is boring. Combat systems are just boring. They don't require my... Maybe it's just me. Maybe I've got ADD. You tell me. Do you think that the action RPG as this collective genre is a good or bad thing? I want to know. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment. And I'll catch you guys later. Thanks.